Recently, Brown's Ferry was almost hit by an EF5 tornado that was more than a mile wide and came very close to this to that facility. Above the three reactors are the stored fuel pools, which are highly deadly, far more so than the radioactivity inside the reactor, actually. That's my understanding. My understanding is these have roofs over them that are metal, but they're not tornado proof. And I'd like to know what action TVA has initiated to correct this problem and put tornado-safe roofs over those fuel pools. If one of those is hit by an EF5 tornado, it's going to be a horrible disaster for this valley.
Let me try to answer that question.
Okay.
Those type of weather circumstances are not unforeseen. They are analyzed in the submittal for the plant design initially, and you are correct that the building that's above that encloses the fuel pool structure itself, it will not probably sustain necessarily a direct hit from a very strong tornado. In fact, the building's designed to allow some pressure relief, so there's not some of the internal collapsing and other things that can occur from some wind speeds. So there is some consideration of those type of weather circumstances. But the key factor here is that the fuel is enclosed in a structure that is very, very substantial and robust. The spent fuel pools themselves are seismic, what we call Category 1 safety-related structures. Many, many feet of reinforced thick concrete. And inside that is strong metal racks that contain the fuel, and this is all contained under a substantial amount of water.
Well, what happens when all the water gets sucked out of it? Or the tornado fractures the water holding capability of the fuel pools. If you can't put water on them, they're going to catch on fire.
I believe what you're referring to is that in some circumstances, if there's a prolonged loss or uncovery of fuel, there are some scenarios in which a fire can occur with a spent fuel pool. There is some controversy associated with that. It does take a substantial length of time to get to that. The fuel has to be without any water for a long period of time before those circumstances would develop. And I agree with you, they would be very serious circumstances. But I think the major factor to keep in mind here is the fuel pools themselves are designed to maintain that volume of water over the fuel. There are some cooling features and some other features associated with the spent fuel pools that might not sustain some conditions. But the ability to always keep the fuel covered with a substantial volume of water will be available. One of the things that the licensee is in the process of doing right now, as a result of the Fukushima event, is through orders that the NRC issued, is to substantially improve the instrumentation on the spent fuel pool level. And so they have obtained a very robust, carefully designed system that's going to give us a remote indication of the fuel pool level. Because in the Fukushima event, there was some concern that one of the pools was actually, substantially lost amount of water and that there might be damaged fuel in there. And the problem was you couldn't get close enough to see it, so you couldn't really tell what was going on. So one of the things that the licensee is doing is putting these fuel pool level indicators. They use a radar guided wave type technology. It's pretty complex. It's a fairly robust design that not only will tell you if the level of the pool is full, it'll tell you how much water is remaining above the top of the fuel, which is a substantial amount of water under normal circumstances. So the idea that tornadoes have hit nuclear power plants before and come very near nuclear power plants before. We haven't had issues with fuel pool integrity. In fact, in many catastrophic events, even strong seismic events, there hasn't been an issue with fuel pool integrity.
Well, I know that the fuel is put closer together than it was designed to be. And that to me is a mistake in management, but anyway, it's been done, and so the fuel pool itself is questionable in its because of that. Anyway, I'm ready to stop talking about that.
That's
I'd
okay,
like
Mr.
to know.
I think you're referring to the fuel loading being, improved so that they could pack more fuel into the
Yes.
fuel pool with densely
Exactly.
packed. And many of the licensees have undergone dry cast loading campaigns
That's what
to reduce that probability. In fact, many licensees are no longer in circumstances in which they have their fuel pools loaded in that manner.
Yeah, I would really appreciate it if that was the case here, because we're at great risk of an accident.
You want to?
Yeah, we have implemented the dry cast storage, the robust storage that Mr. Wirt talked about at the fuel pools at Browns Ferry. So we are on the industry, kind of the front end of that process, and we do incorporate that. So we agree with Mr. Wirt.
When do you plan to have that completed?
Well, that is an ongoing process as we continue through the life of Browns Ferry. So as we continue to use fuel, we continue to implement the dry cast storage.
So you're not really trying to reduce the amount of fuel that's already stored here, you're just trying to keep it from getting any bigger? That's not in caskets I'm talking
No,
about.
they have reduced substantially the amount of fuel that was in the pools. They put many parts of that fuel have been placed in the dry cast. So the
Okay.
density of fuel that's stored in the pool has been reduced.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Another question. Yeah, that was one of them, this dry cast storage, is far superior to the other. From my opinion, we learned at Fukushima that the hardened vents that are in Browns Ferry reactors were the hardened vents that were in the Fukushima reactors. I may be wrong about that, but that's what I had heard or read or something. And what that means is that my understanding is that 2 or 3 of those vents failed at Fukushima. And having the same vents here would indicate that if they get in an overpressure situation, they're going to blow up. Or, the hardened vent is a last-ditch resort that's going to poison the valley anyway, but not like an explosion that would blow the fuel pool up in the air and out into the environment. And I really would like to know, I'm glad to hear about the dry cast storage, and but it's really important that TVA initiate removing all that stored fuel from above those reactors in case one of them does explode, and putting it far enough away that if one does explode, it won't blow the fuel reactor pools down. It can go. I guess that's not a question, but I'd like to know what the status of the MOX fuel is. I know it's under consideration, and I just saw it in a Department of Energy release, and I'd like to know, because I think that is going to be one of the worst mistakes you could possibly do at Browns Ferry or any public utility, is allow an experiment with plutonium in something that is everybody's life and the power. So to me, MOX should be out of the question. They should not experiment with public reactors in places where people exist, which is everywhere. So I'd like to know what TVA's, what is the status of the MOX fuel use in TVA reactors? They're talking about using them in 2 reactors, and the Department of Energy announcement is.
I'm not familiar with the details of the NOx utilization at the other two.
The only thing I'll add is we're not authorized to use MOX fuel, and we would have to go through any type of NRC analysis and our own analysis before we were. So right now, that is not something we're authorized to use, so it's not in use.
Well, my question is, are you pursuing it?
I'm not aware of any active effort to pursue it at this time. We've not submitted any request to the NRC of that nature.
I have a little bit more probably. I was involved a few years ago with DOE that they were preparing a report, and I was reading it and providing comments. And actually, my comment was exactly like everybody else is saying, that there is MOX fuel is not going to be used at Brownsbury. There's no plan for it and nothing. So basically, right now, maybe they are really evaluating at DOE, but as far as I know, TVA and NRC, none of them reviewing or considering.
Not spending
using
any
it.
money on it?
No, we don't have any application in-house. I haven't heard of any test on it. This is something probably DOE is looking into it. And like I said, the report they were doing
want you
it,
to do it, yeah.
I actually reviewed and provided some comments to that. And they were supposed to send me later when they are done, but it got so behind that I didn't hear from it. But as far as I know, not TVA, not NRC are involved in any of it.
I'm glad to hear that.
That's a hot button political issue down yonder, down the road a piece. About big bucks, you know.
I would just comment on, building on your comment, Mr. Morgan, that it's a political issue. What goes unnoticed sometimes is the way the NRC is set up, is that the regional offices, that's where most of us are from, except Faraday. We're just concentrated on implementation of the rules and regulations. We're not, that's why sometimes when you ask us questions about things that are in the future or might be designed or we don't have the answer, because quite frankly, we're focused on what these guys are doing every day.
Yeah.
Because that's our job. And
That's your job, yeah.
so it really is a smart, when the people that were around before I was here that set up the NRC, that was a very, very good design of the structure. And it serves us very well. So that's why a lot of times, it doesn't matter to us. If they get a license amendment to do something to this reactor, it'll go through our process. Once we get it in our hands, our inspectors will take that and use that and the rules and regulations to inspect against. And we'll just make sure that they meet the rules and regulations that they're and the commitments that they committed to. That's the way we do it. Keeps it simple. I would say, Mr. Horn, back on your comments about the hardened vent, you are correct that there was some issues with the vents, of course, at Fukushima, but just a couple comments on that. Some of the problems with the vents at Fukushima occurred because the licensee had a different procedural and process guide to how to utilize those vents. Here at Browns Ferry, they have very specific procedures of when to use those vents, namely under conditions that they're supposed to function. In the Fukushima event, they actually got plant circumstances that were beyond the capability necessarily of the vents. That's not too smart. We don't have that system here. Our process is not set up that way, and we did check that out after the event. In fact, many BWRs did that independently. I talked to a BP 2 weeks after the Fukushima event, and he assured me that they had looked at that to see if their operators would have operated the vents under those circumstances. So I just point out that there's a good chance that we would have been operating, if that event occurred here, the vents under different circumstances. The second thing is that Browns Ferry has committed to improving their hardened vent system, and they have actually submitted an integrated plan of implementation for all those, and in response to an order that came out from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And I can show you afterward, sir, how you can look on our website and you can see the actual schedule. They have a detailed milestone table of how they're going to do that work and how they're going to get it done.
Good.
Let me just ask you a question while we're talking about Fukushima, lessons of Fukushima. is the facility here at Browns Ferry, they stockpiling backup batteries and emergency use generators in case of a catastrophic or beyond design basis event, that stuff will be available. Those materials will be available.
Mr. Warder, we could probably give you an hour-long presentation on what the licensee is doing in response to Fukushima, and I'm sure they could probably
Just briefly, please.
give you a full-scale video of it. This is a serious matter. The licensees, all the licensees across the whole country have put significant effort into improving their, what we call defense in depth, after an event or in an event. And really, it was, it's really good that they're doing this kind of thing, because the next event that might occur, it might not be a seismic event. It might not be a flooding event. But the beauty of many of the things that the licensees have done is it doesn't matter what the initiating event is. They'll be able to get power and they'll be able to get water to the systems that they need. So this licensee, like many others, has embarked on a very ambitious plan to substantially improve how to get electrical power to certain components in an event and how to get water supplies. And these include massive portable diesel generators and pre-staged cabling and system electrical hookups and hose connections into their systems. We were just looking at some of that today. They were color-coded with nice displays so the operators can actually arrange them. You know, the whole purpose of the regulatory agency is to make sure operators are never faced with the circumstances that they had at Fukushima. And I'm sure TVA management feels the same way. They don't want their control room operators to ever have to face something like that. But if they do, in this case, because of many of the actions that they're taking, which are far away better than stockpiling batteries, although they do have lights and they do have batteries, and they have ways to continue to power their battery chargers to keep their batteries that are already existing charged up, their operators are going to be in a lot better position. And I'm just kind of touching the surface here. There's a lot more they've done. They have 2 regional centers that all the utilities have gotten together and they've stockpiled equipment in these regional centers, and they have an airlift capability of delivering that equipment to the sites with a very rapid period of time. AMPO, the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, has been involved in a lot of activities to improve emergency response on sustained emergencies. So we're seeing what I would say a significant defense in depth improvement at these facilities because of these improvements. It is very impressive.
Good.
You guys want to add anything to that?
Now, that was a good description, and it's been a big commitment, but as ex-operators, I mean, that was what we did in our previous early career. It's a marked improvement, and it is significant that we train the operators to all of that too. So all of that equipment is not just there in the stage, it's also trained on how to use it in different methodologies. So it's a big commitment, and it's the right thing to do.
So all the licensees across the country are doing these things, and we're in various stages of coming in behind them and verifying it. When they tell us, okay, we've completed this much of the work and we think we're ready for your inspection, then we'll come in and inspect. And we'll do the inspection just like we inspect anything else. Go through it and make sure it works. We recently piloted one of our mitigating strategy temporary inspection procedures at the Watts Bar facility. I think there were 3 total findings, and they involved pretty low-level details of some labeling aspects of some cabling, things like that. So, pretty positive results. Any other questions? Okay, well, we don't have any folks on the phone tonight, so that makes it real easy. With that, this meeting is adjourned. Thanks.